Today we're going to tie Devin Olsen's Blowtorch. This is my top confidence pattern and catches fish for me everywhere I go. So it's definitely something that you need to have in your fly box. With our thread attached, we can now tie in our tag or tail. I like to tie this in the whole length of the hook shank to avoid any weird bumps in the body of my fly. So we'll just try to keep nice touching turn wraps all the way back to the bend of the hook. Pulling up slightly on that tag will help keep those turns really nice and tight. We're going to have 2 ribs on this fly, so I like to start tying in my Microflash rib here at the back of the hook. This just minimizes the amount of times that I'm going to be taking the thread back and forth on the hook to just minimize the bulk that we build up on this fly. Now that we're back to the front of the hook, we can tie in our monofilament tippet for our second rib. I like to start by just kind of putting that tippet in the slot of the bead and then letting thread tension pull that rib over to the opposite side of the hook. So I have a rib material on each side of the hook shank. Now that we have all that tied in, we can create a nice thin dubbing noodle of the best dubbing in the world, Peacock Black Ice Dub. Here I'm using Fulling Mills Tactical Microflash Dub, and it really, at least for me, dubs up really tight and really small dubbing noodles. So I really like to use that. Try to keep this body thin and tapered slightly, but you'll see here in a minute that having those double ribs on this fly really can help smooth out any problems that you might have. We're now going to wrap our ribbing materials. I like to start with the one closest to me and always wrap under the hook for my first part of the wrap. Then if I have any high spots in that dubbing body, I'll put that wrap right on top of that high spot and it'll smooth out that body for me. Now we can wrap the tippet rib. Now when you do that first wrap underneath the hook and you have both ribbings on each side of the hook, that's going to counter wrap them and give this fly a lot of strength. Again, don't forget you can wrap this tippet rib on top of any high spot that you have on that dubbed body and fix that taper. Now's a great time to go and trim the tag. I like to put the scissors right on the back of the hook and trim right there for a nice consistent trim. I'm going to finish things up with this fly with a CDC collar. Here I'm just tying in the tip of the CDC feather, but there are a lot of different ways to get that CDC on the hook. You can also use a split thread or a dubbing loop. There really isn't a right answer. We just want to get the CDC on the hook. Now that we got that CDC tied onto the hook, we only want to get 1 or 2 turns of this feather. We don't want to have too much bulk in our CDC. We want to keep it fairly sparse so that those fibers have plenty of room to move around in the water. This CDC feather is a little thin, so 2 turns seem to work best for me on this one, and then we'll just get that stem secured so we can tie this thing off. When you tie off that CDC stem, those CDC fibers are going everywhere, so I like to try to collect them all with my fingers and get some wraps in front to kind of get everything moving backwards before I trim off that butt section. With that trimmed out, we can kind of clean up the head of this fly and get a nice hot spot collar on this. With that hot spot collar complete, we can then kind of use our fingernails to trim these CDC fibers to length. I don't mind them being too long. It's never seemed to hurt my fishing at all. We can now finish this fly up with a whip finish or two and trim our thread. And that's one of the most productive flies in the world, Devin Olsen's Blowtorch. Thanks for watching.